HasanAbi corporate. I don't even know what that is. Oh yeah, I wanted to read the Lib article about Lib women dating conservative men. Can someone send that to me without a paywall? That isn't new, lol? No. There's a new article from, I think, the Washington Post editorial board came out with a banger of an article. No, that's not the poll that we're talking about. This is not it. There's a WAPO editorial board that wrote how if attitudes don't shift, the political dating mismatch will threaten marriage. Here it is. Ideological polarization is now a mainstay of American politics. Millions of young Americans will go home to Thanksgiving and find themselves in uncomfortable situations with relatives, especially uncles, apparently, who love former President Donald Trump, hate vaccination, think January 6th, blah, 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 blah. Right? The problem with polarization, though, is that it has effects well beyond the political realm, and these can be difficult to anticipate. One example is the collapse of the American marriage. A growing number of young women are discovering that they can't find suitable male partners. As a whole, men are increasingly struggling with or suffering from higher unemployment, lower rates of educational attainment, more drug addiction, and deaths of despair. And generally less purpose. Or direction in their lives. But it's not just that. There's a growing ideological divide, too. Since Mr. Trump's election in 2016, the percentage of single women ages 18 to 30 who identify as liberal has shot up from slightly over 20% to 32%. Young men have not followed suit. If anything, they've grown more conservative. This ideology gap is particularly pronounced among Gen Z white people. According to a major New American Enterprise Institute survey, Kaya, come here, baby. Come. Good girl. Good girly. Does this mean that women are more leftist than men or subsuming liberal and left? Yeah, it's always subsuming liberal and left. Can't really tell what it is. Okay. American Enterprise Institute survey, 46% of white Gen Z women are liberal compared to only 28% of white Gen Z men, more of whom, 36%, now identify as conservative. Norms around sexuality and gender are diverging too. Whereas 61% of Gen Z women see themselves as feminists, only 43% of Gen Z men do. It is little surprise that manfluencers, particularly such as Andrew Tate, who promote outright misogyny, have their biggest following among boys and young men. No wonder that the HasanAbi broadcast has lost its grip on the influence that it once held over a population of youngsters. Yeah, that's right. We're boomers 20 plus. Yeah. I'm still here, dude. The last white male here. I know. Anyway, in another era, political or ideological differences might have had less impact on marriage rates, but increasingly the political is personal. A 2021 survey of college students found that 71% of Democrats would not date someone with opposing views. There is some logic to this. Marriage across religious or political lines, if either partner considers those things to be central to their identity, can be associated with lower levels of life satisfaction, and politics is becoming more central to people's identity. This mismatch means that someone will need to compromise. As the researchers Lyman Stone and Brad Wilcox have noted, about 1 in 5 young singles will have little choice but to marry someone outside their ideological tribe. The other option is that they decline to get married at all. Not an ideal outcome, considering the data showing that marriage is good for the health of societies and individuals alike. This, of course, is on average. Marriage isn't for everyone, nor is staying in a physically or emotionally abusive. Okay, we got it. The marriage dilemma reflects a broader societal one. Whether people can find ways to adapt to a new normal of ideological and political polarization instead of hoping, against all evidence, that it will dissipate. Unfortunately, Americans have not equipped themselves to discuss, debate, and reason across these divides. Americans have increasingly sorted themselves according to ideological orientation. Why is it that we always have to massage the needs of, like, American conservatives, oftentimes white men, because this study specifically is looking at white men and white women, while simultaneously looking at none of the other races. And it's always like, yeah, American women have to suck it up. White women have to suck it up with white men and just, date outside of their ideological boundaries. More ethnic men be more conservative in some ways, e.g. Muslims. Won't ethnic men be more conservative in some ways, e.g. Muslims? Muslims in America are literally more progressive, both on social issues and are reliable Democratic Party voters in general. That's such a weird fucking take, man. You said ethnic men. Like, what the okay. They expect people to share their own convictions and commitments, but people's insight and understanding about the world often come from considering alternative perspectives that may at first seem odd or offensive. Gen Z is still relatively young, and the Trump-era divisions between single men and women might yet reverse themselves, but there's a good chance they won't, particularly if Mr. Trump manages to inject the body politique with his distinct brand of existential dread during or after the 2024 elections. It is worth thinking both ahead and beyond Mr. Trump. A cultural shift might be necessary, one that views politics as a part of people's identity, but far from the most important part. America's ability to live together, quite literally, might depend on it. Wait, what do you mean politics is not that important? I mean, yeah, I say all the time that you shouldn't cast aside people that have different political perspectives than you, and you should try to have conversations with them regularly. But this notion that, like, oh, it's simply politics, like if you're a conservative, let's say you think that abortion, let's say you want to vote for a Republican candidate that has played a role in undermining your bodily autonomy. Why is this just something that you need to cast aside and just suck it up? If you are someone who views black and brown people as real human beings, for example, and your partner is racist, like why is that supposed to be seen as like a thing that you need to overcome? And the expectation isn't here to get men to chill out, it feels like, and no longer see the world through the red-pilled manosphere lens, but instead, I don't know, maybe I'm not reading it correctly, but I do get the feeling that this almost feels like they're telling women to suck it up, like the liberals to suck it up, basically. Am I wrong? Maybe they're just saying that men need to also suck it up and no longer feel as though politics is important. But I don't think it's the men that is causing this division, especially because the conservative politics of men is sometimes at odds with, you know, civil liberties of the other party. No, it's just highlighting the differences. Even if it's just highlighting the differences, first of all, it's hilarious that they're fucking promoting the American Enterprise Institute study at the foundation of this. This is the Washington Post editorial board. It's supposed to be a liberal institution, by the way. Yeah. Daily Kos. The Washington Post is very worried that American women don't want to marry Trump supporters. Presumably, the Post editorial board is a good reason for alerting us to this phenomena. But what it doesn't bother to do is tell us why it is occurring. And if what the editorial pretends is true, Americans will be well served by knowing why. Had the Post bothered to provide some basic context, explaining that young American women in particular are loath to date right-wing, presumably Republican men, because they find some specific views, attitudes, and values they represent to be abhorrent, the editorial might live up to the serious social ramifications it implicates. It's easy enough to point at Donald Trump as the catalyst for such drastic social upheaval, but by failing to address the actual belief and value systems his presence has stoked among Republican men, and instead just throwing up their hands and asserting that such attitudes must change and someone will need to compromise, the Post ends up simply doing a disservice to his readers because, quite honestly, an issue this profound affecting the country's future deserves more than the shrinking, hesitant treatment the Post chooses to afford to it. At least the Post editorial does a decent job explaining the underlying issue, as the editor notes. Yeah, they talk about the problem with polarization. But isn't anyone else getting tired of hearing excuses that why men in particular are increasingly struggling? Higher unemployment? Really? It's 3.9%. Lower rates of educational attainment? Nope. Those rates are higher than ever for both men and women. Perhaps if the Post had acknowledged the reality of stagnant wage growth, out-of-control housing, and healthcare costs, which affect women just as much, if not more, as men, that might have proved a more enlightening exercise. As for the psychological traumas fueling drastically more drug addiction and deaths of despair among men, but apparently not as much among women, it might also have been helpful to ask whether it isn't more of a case of the male ego and a wounded sense of their assumed primacy in our society that's actually the root of these problems, which aren't occurring to the same degree in other countries. I mean, I think that part of that is also, no, I think there's problems with like educational attainment for men in comparison to women. And I think part of that problem relies on the fact that our entire economy revolves around the service sector and fucking blue collar, white collar jobs, as opposed to what it once had, which were not just white collar jobs, but blue collar jobs, and more opportunities in the trades. Like that is where that unemployment number comes from, or that is where I think that is where the like men's feelings being hurt come from. That's it. Problem is, we fucking, we exported all that, so we don't have that anymore. So, oops, sorry. It's a shell of what it once used to be. But I digress. The Post editors do acknowledge that the political polarization seems to be a driving factor in explaining this collapse in presumably heterosexual marriages. According to a major New American Enterprise Institute survey, which, by the way, American Enterprise, that's crazy. Blame capitalism. Boys don't vote for more right-wing guys. What? It's true everything is more passive, not suiting men's nature, perhaps. Blame capitalism. Boys don't vote for more right-wing guys. What? Are lesbians destroying the institution of marriage by not marrying conservative men? I mean, this is like a very long way of basically repeating what Jordan Peterson says all the time, which is that, sexual liberation and feminism and birth control and more meaningful ways that women can retain bodily autonomy and not simply assume the position of a baby incubator has been devastating on a patriarchal societal structure that everyone everyone grew into and was used to. And now we can't cope with that reality, so we must return. We must return. And it's an inherently fascist, inherently reactionary ideal that secretly, and maybe not so subtly sometimes, openly advocates to make women servile again, It's very odd. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, seems like a skill issue, Seems like men need to cope with the changing times, right? Because I do think that there's a problem here. But I don't think the problem is like, well, women's liberty have made dating more competitive, and therefore men have to take care of themselves more than they used to in the past. But ultimately, the solution doesn't revolve around relegating women back into the kitchen, like pushing women back into the kitchen and ensuring traditional gender norms and traditional gender standards. Or maybe it's because women have total control of the dating scene and can much more easily move on from breakups. They can just ruin your life and be someone with new the next day. Dude, this is so painfully personal. I'm sorry that happened to you. What you just described as the standard is just simply an experience that you had that you are trying to universalize. And I'm certain that there's other men in this chat as well who feel this way. But goddamn, dude. No, like this is like, or maybe because women sometimes tell you that they love you, and then all of a sudden they decide to break up with you out of nowhere, and then before you know it, lo and behold, they found a different partner, and then they've deleted your phone number and actually blocked you, so you can't even reach out to them, and now I can't even get my favorite hoodie back. I mean, that's a thing that could happen as a common experience. Or maybe because Brenda has total control of the dating scene and can much more easily move on with Brandon after a breakup. They can just ruin your life and be on with someone else tomorrow. I'm going to not laugh. Okay, listen. Listen. I love you. I'm sorry that this happened to you. But this is not a universal value. This is not a universal principle. And if I knew more about the dynamics if I knew more about the dynamic of the situation that you experience, maybe I could offer you more, personal help in this regard. However, one thing that I can immediately tell you without knowing anything else is that the assumption that this is a universal experience for women and all women is not coming from a place of any kind of like empirical evidence or rational thinking, critical thinking, but instead emotional thinking. And that's not what men do, you know what I mean? Men don't do that, right? Oh, we're not emotional. We're rational beings. So if you want to rationalize it, you must remember that this is simply an individual that wronged you in some ways, and you should assess what you might have done wrong and what they might have done wrong, and then move on with your life, get closure from within, and then never carry that baggage with you onto the next relationship. This way you will not be seen as a scorned partner that will carry that baggage onto the next relationship and then make it impossible for that relationship to also work. Get it? Clearly, what we must do is get rid of the no-fault divorce. Also off topic, pretty privilege is even worse on women. I mean, I think one thing that people always, throw in my face, especially as it pertains to pretty privilege, is that like nobody is discounting that given your circumstances, your situation might be harder than others. You know what I mean? Yeah, dude, it's just the truth. You know what I mean? What's that fucking 100 Thieves kid? What's his name? The pretty boy. He's 100 Thieves. He's like a TikTok guy. Vinny Hacker. He's hot as okay? He's so hot. No, not Will, you idiots. No, Vinny Hacker. He's hot as Do you see me fucking running around being upset all the goddamn time that he is like, he looks insanely good, you know? Yeah, there's just people that are always going to have things way easier than you. It's just the truth. It's just the truth. That's how it works. You can't be fucking sad about it. I mean, look at this guy. Look at this fucking guy. You can just sit around and get upset that you don't look like that, or you can do something about it, become the best version of yourself, and then also date within your field. That's it.